Hey guys. You guys have gotten really good at identifying active and passive voice and writing an active and passive voice and changing passive to active and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the uses of active and passive voice. Okay. So, I've told you guys that active voice is generally more lively and interesting, and that most of the time we want to write an active voice. Okay, it eliminates unnecessary wordiness from our writing, makes our writing a lot clearer a lot of the time. So generally we want to default to active voice. Okay, however, there are a couple situations where it is acceptable and maybe better to use passive voice. So I want to talk about those situations so you can think about like how to apply these to your own writing. Okay, so let's look at a couple cases where passive voice is appropriate. So first case, the agent or doer or whoever you want to call it, the person that's actually performing the action, is not important, or you want to emphasize something other than the doer or the agent. Okay, so you want to put the emphasis in the sentence on, you know, the object of the sentence, the thing in the sentence that the action is being done to. Okay, so for example, the police were immediately called to the scene. Right, so in this case, maybe it's like a random bystander that called the police and it's an emergency situation, and it doesn't matter the identity of who called the police. It matters that the police are on their way. So we're putting the emphasis on the police, on the object of the action, instead of the person that actually made the call, the subject of the action. Okay. Now, second scenario where it is okay to use passive voice is if you don't actually know who performed the action. Okay. So for example, if you had a sentence like a woman was murdered in her home last night, okay, and I don't know who did the murdering, okay, you can phrase it this way where you're focusing on the object of the action instead of the subject. Okay. Now, I want to look at a couple examples. So let's look at this one. The diamonds were stolen from the vault. The police found no fingerprints, and the security cameras had mysteriously been turned off. Okay, so I've underlined the passive sections here, and these are situations where it is acceptable to use passive voice. Okay, so this is one where I don't know who stole the diamonds, and I don't know who turned off the security cameras. I could say thieves stole the diamond from the vault, but like, it's not necessary, and sometimes saying something like thieves stole this also gets a little bit redundant and repetitive. Okay, so let's look at another example. A little boy was playing in his front yard when the neighbors came by. Basketball was played by everyone, and everyone went home happy. So this is one where I would say that you would want to switch it, because I've given you a subject of the sentence, everyone, okay? And I could easily say everyone played basketball. I don't have a particular reason to emphasize basketball here. I don't know who, it's not like I'm in a situation where I don't know who played, right? So that's one where I would want to switch it over to active. All right, let's look at my last one. The president was handed the nuclear launch codes. Thinking deeply, he turned and gave the order. The bomb was launched. Okay, so again, I've underlined the passive sections here. So this is a scenario where I would leave it passive, okay? Because here, the president was handed the nuclear launch codes. Probably doesn't matter which random person handed the president the codes. It matters that the president now has them. And then similarly with the bomb was launched, right? It's already apparent from the sentence that the bomb is being launched on the president's order. And in this case, I might want to emphasize the bomb, right? Put that in, first thing in the sentence where it's going to stand out more, instead of going back to the president. Okay. All right. Thinking about that last one, though, the bomb was launched, I do want to talk about a kind of sneaky way people sometimes use passive voice. This shows up a lot in like journalism and police reports and stuff like that. That can be surprisingly damaging. So passive voice is sometimes called the coward's cop-out. So let's look at some passive voice sentences and kind of talk about what I mean. That child is being abused. The decision has already been made. We were badly burnt by the sun. The storeroom was left unlocked. The vase will be fixed with glue before it is seen. Mistakes were made. The village has been pacified. The library is being liberated as we speak. 50 employees will be given news of their future next week. Now, if these sentences were a little bit more honest and a little bit more active, they might look something like this. That mother is abusing her child. The CEO has already decided that. We burned ourselves in the sun. I left the storeroom unlocked. I'll fix the vase before mom sees it. The president and his chief of staff committed crimes. We bombed the village until nothing breathed there anymore. We are burning books and breaking windows in the library. We will fire 50 employees next week. So a lot of times passive voice is used to kind of like soften the actual truth and to sort of displace blame. So instead of saying like, I made a mistake, saying like, a mistake was made. Okay. So it takes the action out. Here's one from a recent news story. It's like a real world one. So this is one where the FBI is investigating this guy to determine whether he should get security clearance. It's like a guy in government. So the FBI contacts this guy and says like, hey, your wife said that you, or ex-wife I think, said that you were violent, and she has a black eye, and the guy says in response, he told others they were arguing over a vase and she was somehow hit with the vase. So that's just an interesting passive framing here, right? To say that, hey, like, yeah, I know she has a black eye. Somehow something hit her in the eye. Can't imagine how that happened. And she was hit with the vase. So how does this actually affect people? By erasing the perpetrator, it actually changes people's perceptions of the situation. So a 1995 study found that after reading sexual assault stories written in the passive voice, readers actually were more accepting of the crime compared to stories written in the active voice. And the same study found that most stories about sexual assault crimes were written in the passive voice. And that people tend to use passive voice more when the perpetrators of crimes are men versus when they're women. So just kind of some interesting statistics on how this can affect people. So back to that example that started this whole thing, the bomb was launched. So if I'm writing this because I want to place emphasis on the bomb, okay, great. If I'm writing this because I want to make the president seem less guilty and active in this situation, not so great. So I know that's like a lot of information that you probably don't necessarily think about when you're writing, but it's something to think about when we're reading and analyzing the writing of others and thinking about how passive and active voice can actually really affect people's perceptions of what's happening. So it's just an interesting thing to think about and to take into consideration. Okay. All right. So just to recap, active voice, better most of the time, less wordy, more active, gives the action to the person that's actually performing that action, so it can make our writing more clear. Passive voice, okay, if you don't actually know who performed the action or you're trying to emphasize the object of the sentence over the subject of the sentence. So something to think about, and we will do some more practice with this week.